For centuries, people have tried to decode one of the most bizarre and terrifying visions in the entire Bible. Daniel's dream of four monstrous beasts rising from the sea: a lion with eagle's wings, a ravenous bear, a leopard with four heads, and a fourth, indescribable creature with iron teeth and 10 horns. Many people read this and immediately think it's a roadmap to the end times, a literal prediction of future global events. Others dismiss it as ancient mythology, interesting but ultimately irrelevant. But what if both of those approaches miss the point? What if these visions weren't primarily about predicting the distant future, but about surviving a terrifying present? Today, we're going to break down one of the Bible's most misunderstood prophecies. By the end of this video, you will understand why Daniel wrote these visions and what they actually meant to the people who first read them. We'll decode what each beast represents based on historical records and literary analysis. You'll learn the difference between prophecy and political resistance literature and see why both can be true at the same time. Most importantly, you'll discover why this ancient apocalyptic message is still powerfully relevant for us today. To understand prophecy, we first have to understand history. To really get what's happening in Daniel chapter 7, we have to start with a crucial question. When was this written? The traditional view is that Daniel wrote this during the Babylonian exile, around the 6th century before Common Era. But a majority of modern biblical and historical scholars now believe the book was compiled in its final form much later, during the 2nd century, before Common Era. Why does this 400-year difference matter so much? Because it completely changes the context. If it's written in the 6th century, Daniel is predicting empires that are centuries away. But if it's written in the 2nd century, the author is writing for people who are living under the boot of one of those empires' times right now. Asterisk. They were living through a period of intense persecution under a Greek king from the Seleucid Empire named Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He outlawed Jewish religious practices, defiled the temple in Jerusalem, and executed anyone who resisted. It was a time of crisis and fear. So why use such strange, symbolic language? Why not just say, King Antiochus is a tyrant? Because when you're living under an oppressive regime, you can't speak out directly without being killed. Apocalyptic literature, with its coded language of beasts and horns, was a recognized genre of resistance. It was a way to send a powerful, encrypted message to a suffering community. The message was this: your oppressors might look like powerful kings to the world, but from God's perspective, they are nothing more than monstrous, temporary beasts, and their time is running out. So let's decode these beasts. What did they represent to that original audience, living in fear in the 2nd century? The vision itself gives us the first clue. Daniel is told, the 4 beasts are 4 kingdoms that will rise from the earth. The first beast is a lion with eagle's wings. Its wings are plucked off, it's lifted to its feet, and it's given the heart of a human. This is a clear symbol for the Babylonian Empire. Babylon was the first major empire to conquer Judah and take its people into exile. The lion was a common symbol for Babylon, and the imagery of being humbled and given a human heart directly mirrors the story of King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4, where the arrogant king is humbled by God before having his sanity restored. For the original readers, this was history. Babylon had come and gone. Next, Daniel sees a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." This beast represents the Medo-Persian Empire, the kingdom that conquered Babylon. The bear being raised up on one side is a brilliant symbol for the dual nature of the empire, where the Persian side was far more dominant than the Median side. The three ribs in its mouth are widely understood to represent the three major conquests that established the empire's power: Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. This too was history. The Medo-Persian Empire had also risen and fallen. The third beast is even stranger, a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. It was given authority to rule. This beast symbolizes the Greek Empire, founded by Alexander the Great. Why a leopard with 4 wings? Because no empire in history had ever expanded with such astonishing speed. Alexander conquered the known world in just over a decade. But after his sudden death, his massive empire wasn't passed to a single heir. It was shattered and divided among his 4 leading generals. These are the 4 heads. This historical fact is crucial because one of those 4 successor kingdoms was the Seleucid Empire, the very empire that was persecuting the Jews when the book of Daniel was being written. The author is saying, look, we know where this monster came from. It's the third beast. And that brings us to the 4th beast. This one is different. It's not compared to any known animal. Daniel just describes it as terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth and bronze claws. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It had 10 horns on its head. This beast represents the most terrifying power the world had yet seen. For Daniel's original audience, this could have symbolized the brutal and fragmenting nature of the Greek kingdom in their time, especially with the 10 horns representing a succession of chaotic rulers. But many scholars, both ancient and modern, also see this as pointing toward the next great world power that was already looming on the horizon: Rome. Rome was known for its iron legions and its brutal, crushing efficiency. But the vision doesn't stop there. As Daniel is considering the 10 horns, another horn appears. A little horn. This one is different. It has the eyes of a human and a mouth that spoke boastfully. It uproots 3 of the other horns and begins to wage war against God's holy people, prevailing against them. This little horn is one of the most debated figures in all of biblical prophecy. Who or what is it? There are 2 primary ways to understand this figure, and they aren't mutually exclusive. The first is the historical reading. For the Jewish people suffering in the 2nd century before Common Era, the little horn was an unmistakable symbol of their current oppressor, King Antiochus IV. He was the boastful king who spoke against the God of Israel. He set up an idol of Zeus in the Jerusalem temple and sacrificed a pig on the altar. The text says the little horn would oppress God's people for a time, times, and half a time, or 3.5 years. This corresponds almost exactly to the period of Antiochus's most intense persecution, from 167 to 164. Before Common Era, which ended with the Maccabean revolt and the rededication of the temple, the event still celebrated today as Hanukkah. For them, this wasn't a future prediction. It was a description of their present nightmare and a promise that it had a specific, limited duration. It gave them hope that the end of their suffering was in sight. The second way to understand the little horn is the eschatological, or end times, reading. In this view, which became prominent in Christian theology, the little horn is seen as a type or a foreshadowing of a future figure, often called the Antichrist, who will rise to power before the end of history. This figure will also be boastful, persecute believers, and set himself up against God. This reading sees Daniel's prophecy as having a dual fulfillment, an immediate one in Antiochus and an ultimate one in the distant future. So which one is it? Prophecy or political commentary? The beauty of apocalyptic literature is that it's often both. It speaks directly into a current historical crisis, providing hope and a framework for understanding suffering, while also painting a picture of a larger, cosmic struggle between God's kingdom and the kingdoms of the world that resonates through every generation. The pattern of arrogant, bestial human power rising up against God is one that repeats itself throughout history. Antiochus was one manifestation of that pattern. For later readers, the text served as a warning that others would follow. After Daniel sees these terrifying beasts and the arrogant little horn, the entire vision shifts from earth to heaven. The camera pans up. Daniel sees thrones being set in place, and the Ancient of Days, a title for God himself, takes his seat. His clothing was white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire. A river of fire was flowing out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. This is the climax of the vision, judgment. All the power and terror of the beasts on earth shrink into insignificance before the majesty of the heavenly court. Daniel watches as the fourth beast is slain because of its boastful words, and its body is destroyed and thrown into the flaming fire. The other beasts have their authority taken away, but they are allowed to live on for a period of time, symbolizing that while their empires fall, human history continues. Then, Daniel sees one of the most significant figures in the entire Bible. He says, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. This son of man approaches the Ancient of Days and is led into his presence. He is given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed." This is the ultimate answer to the terror of the beasts. For the persecuted Jews of the 2nd century, this was the promise that held them together. No matter how powerful Antiochus seemed, no matter how terrifying the empire, God was still on his throne. Judgment was coming, and ultimate authority belonged not to the beastly empires of the world, but to a heavenly figure, the Son of Man, who represents both the ideal human ruler and, in some interpretations, the faithful people of God themselves. They were promised that they would inherit an eternal kingdom that could never be shaken by earthly tyrants. This wasn't just a political cartoon mocking their enemy. It was a profound theological promise that God's kingdom would ultimately triumph over all evil and oppression. It was a message of defiant hope. So, when we pull back and look at the whole picture, what can we take away from Daniel's vision today? I believe there are 3 critical insights. First, biblical prophecy is not simple fortune-telling. Daniel wasn't trying to give his readers a secret decoder ring to predict the next 2,000 years of newspaper headlines. He was doing something far more profound. He was practicing theological interpretation of history. He was giving people a way to see their current events from God's perspective, to see the brutal empires of their day not as invincible, but as temporary, monstrous beasts destined for judgment. Second, context changes everything. When we understand who Daniel was writing for and what they were experiencing, the fear, the oppression, the crisis of faith, it transforms how we read these visions. It moves them from being an abstract puzzle about the future into a powerful piece of pastoral care and political resistance for people in the past. It shows us a God who is deeply concerned with the suffering of his people in their specific moment in history. And third, the vision reveals eternal truths dressed in ancient clothes. While the specific beasts represent empires that have long since crumbled to dust, the underlying message is timeless. The core truth is that God's eternal kingdom will outlast every arrogant, violent, and oppressive earthly power. That's a truth that applies to every generation that has ever faced tyranny, uncertainty, or the feeling that evil is winning. The next time you read an apocalyptic passage in the Bible, whether it's in Daniel or the Book of Revelation, I encourage you to ask a few questions. Who was the author writing to? What was happening in their world? What were they afraid of? Answering those questions will unlock a layer of meaning you might have otherwise missed. You might just discover that these ancient texts are less about predicting the future and more about giving us a divine perspective to faithfully navigate our present. Daniel's visions of terrifying beasts aren't meant to be a riddle that keeps us guessing in fear. They are a masterclass in how an oppressed people can maintain defiant hope when everything around them seems hopeless. Whether you read them as historical commentary, as theological prophecy, or as both, the core message is the same. God sees. His timeline is not our timeline. And the kingdoms of this world, no matter how powerful they seem, will one day give way to his eternal kingdom. That's not just a prediction, it's a promise. Now I have a question for you. After hearing the historical context, which interpretation resonates most with you? Do you see Daniel's visions primarily as a commentary on the ancient oppression of his time, or as a prophecy pointing to larger patterns that repeat throughout history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. For links to some of the scholarly resources and historical articles we used to put this video together, check out the description. And if you found this deep dive helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of misunderstood texts. Thank you for watching.